This used to be an area of homelessness, prostitution, and drugs. If you ever seen the movie New Jack City, this is kind of like the exact set how it used to be. And when I was when I was drinking a lot and everything, I would try to get into the shelters, but a lot of times I would be late getting in the shelter. And so I would have to find me a place to stay outside. And so these grates, they got these sewer grates, and the sewer grates have steam coming out of warm steam, and that's why I slept.
Just wanna take a drink of your fountain that never runs dry. So much pressure to get it right. It's like all eyes are on me, but I'm supposed to be free.
So this is Hawthorne right here. This is where I came after St. Francis Home for Boys, and it's also where I came that night my mother chased me down the street with a knife, and I ended up at the police station. And so this is where I was at. It was probably about 8-9 o'clock at night when we showed up, and I was admitted for the second time. And right at that top floor there is where I used to look out the window and wait for my mother to show up, and a lot of times she wouldn't show up. And I would stay back, and I would have fits and end up in the quiet room, and it's like this little padded room that they have where they lock you up at, and until you calm down. And back then they had tranquilizers, like pills, that they would give you to help you calm down. And so this is Hawthorne. But I wanted you to wear button-up just in case.
Yeah, I will. Gotta be ready.
Gotta be ready.
That's my post. Got to.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Especially next to you, bro. This is really creepy. I'm in like a time zone right now because I haven't walked up to this door since 1983. Okay. So back in the day, this is the entrance that I came in, and this is the way that I went out. So I've spent quite a few months here, a couple years altogether, and I learned a lot here. This is where my temper was managed, and I just wanted to show you Hawthorne.
Right now, there's a lot more than music right now, way more than a walk in the park, bump to it right now. Yeah. You can all up into it right now, change it all, you can do it right now. Heard a whole lot of lies, can deny you're the truest right now. How
can I say this? Inkster is, like I said, it's a hood. My mother did a lot of her dirt there, and it was back in the 70s. There was a lot of drugs, a lot of gambling, anything you can find in a hood. It was there. And my mother and my aunt ran around in Inkster and did a lot of stuff that they shouldn't have been doing. And I'm gonna show you that part. The notorious Carlisle and Harrison. I haven't been over here in a minute. I haven't really stood right here since I was a kid. So this is all, I'm trying to take this in and tell you what's going on at the same time. So it's kind of weird. I got a lot of memories coming back right now that I'm trying to sort through. And but yeah, cab stand right there, laundromat right there. This was a gambling spot right here. This is where my mother would drop me off if she was gonna be any length of time. She would drop me off right there. and I would be in there with the other kids, and she'd be out here doing her thing. This is like a ghost town now, though. A lot of stuff has been torn down. But this is the spot. If anybody that's from Inkster know about this, they know about Harrison and Carlisle. Anybody from Inkster, they know about
My son got killed down the street. My son Demetrius Reed
today.
got killed 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
Yeah, today. It's the 29th of December. You got, listen, I know it's all over Facebook right now. Crime, stoppers, all that. You know what I'm saying? But we used to run the block. Certainly me and my boy Demetrius, my name Demetrius too. He lost his son. His son committed suicide after my son died. But he ended up getting locked up. It's still here, but we just gotta give back, man, to the community and stuff, because a lot of our kids suffer because they taking the fathers away, so they don't have nothing to look forward to. They took the schools away, all the basketball courts. All they got is drugs and guns. So what you think they gonna be? A product of the environment, bro.
Right.
So we gotta change that as black men.
So
You know what I'm saying?
what I had to do was I had to include myself in my story and include where I self-sabotage things. I had to look at my belief system, you know, as how my story was. I had to look at what made up my belief system. I had to I had to look at the story as a whole, you know, and include myself in it. And we still in the hood. We just right down the street from Harrison and Carlisle, the liquor store we just left. But what I wanted to do is, last time I saw my mother, we got into a fight, and you know, we was drinking together, and we got into a fight, and I stormed out the door, and I threw my 40 bottle at her and just missed her head. And a year later, about a year and a half later, I ended up in prison. I called my grandmother back, or I called my grandmother to, you know, tell her where I was and try to make some type of amends. And my aunt answered the phone and told me that my mother had been dead for a year. And so the last time I saw my mother was in a fight when we were both drunk. I think the biggest barrier is forgiveness, and addressing forgiveness and not really understanding what forgiveness is. I think another barrier is the lack of willingness to know, you know, what actually happened, you know, when it comes to, you know, the abuse and neglect. Well, you know, what was happening with the parents at the time. You know, a lot of youth they're so traumatized to where they don't really care about what the parents was going through. They don't care to understand it. So the biggest barrier, one of the biggest barriers, is the lack of understanding. So in my case with my mother, I went through life just thinking that she didn't care about me, or she just let them come get me. She just didn't want to be a parent anymore, or there was something about me that she didn't like. When the truth of the matter is that she had a drug problem. This is Aylin Stamps, your resilient foster kid here. Today, I just thought I'm kind of at a loss of words right now, but I thought I'd just let you in on my process of healing today. And today I'm at my mother's grave. Just coming to pay her a little visit. I'm down here visiting my grandmother, and I decided to stop in, pay my mother some respects, and just kind of talk to her for a minute. There's still a process of healing in all this that I'm going through, and it has a lot to do with acceptance. It has a lot to do with my understanding of what went on with my mother, and understanding addiction, and understanding how addiction works. And this is the end result of it right here. It's either jails, institutions, or death. And in this particular case, it was death for my mother. And I just want to say this: my mother loved me. My mother really loved me, but it was the drugs that she just couldn't raise me as an addict. So this is my grandmother's house. This is where I grew up until I was about 8 years old, and this is where I was taken from. I was taken from here and placed in my first boys' home, Christmas Day, 1978. The house looks much different than what it looked like, back then. So since then, it's got new siding and garage and everything like that. But it didn't look nothing like this. You do things like that when your kids move out. Today I got the key to my grandmother's house. I couldn't say that she would trust me with anything back in 1990. So then when we get done here, we're gonna go down to the cast corridor.
Ooh.
So that's where.
Oh, the traffic's pretty bad. Gonna be pretty bad pretty soon. Poor KC, he done shoveled my stuff so many times. Every time I look out there, he's shoveling my snow. Well, he won't take no for an answer. He gonna do it. So I should leave him alone.
But he don't want you to slip and fall.
I ain't going nowhere. That's where he keeps going.
I'm just sitting here kind of reminiscing on some pictures. And this was my Aunt Marilyn right here. And she got killed back in 1987. And she had a problem with addiction. And her lifestyle had led her into a place where, Marilyn was the first one of the kids to die, and my mother took it hard, and I think that's really what really spiraled her addiction. It was out of control, but it really went out of control when Marilyn died. And this is my Uncle Johnny. My favorite uncle. He died in the 90s. I can't remember exactly what year it was, but he died of AIDS, and he lived a different lifestyle. That's the best way I can put it. And he got HIV, which eventually birthed itself into AIDS. And so very handsome guy.
Let me see. Did you look in my room?
Is that me?
There you
That's
are.
me.
Uh-huh.
I ain't seen this. Oh, you gotta see this. Look at that. Oh man, and then that's me right there. You can't say I wasn't fly. You can't even say. Little forehead action, but yeah, that's my man Jackie right there. Jackie is the baby, and the baby of the aunts. Me and her was real close. We was like brother and sister, and she just died last year, and she had cancer, she had diabetes, and she had Crohn's disease, but the cancer is what got her, and it was real hard on us. So this year was a hard Christmas. It was a real hard Christmas for us. This is when I was 13. It's a Jerry curl with the bow tie.
There's a way that seems right to man, but in the end, it only leads to death. This
Forgiveness is
like a vapor.
something that you say, okay, well, I forgive this person, which makes the offense okay, and that's not true. Forgiveness is something that you can't wait for your feelings to line up with. It's a decision that you make. It's you're saying, okay, I'm gonna let this go. It wasn't right what you did. I don't like what you did, but I'm gonna let this go, and I'm gonna try to work on, I'm gonna try to work on getting my relationship with you back together if we can. But it's not saying that what you did is okay. It's a decision that you have to make. And what forgiveness does is it releases you from the bondage of being the victim. And it releases you from anger. It releases you a lot of times from depression. So forgiveness is a huge thing. And it's a hard sell to people that's been afflicted by foster care and abuse and neglect, because a lot of times what we do is we personalize it. I'll just part of me forgiving is coming out here to see her, coming out here to talk to her. That's part of the forgiving for me. Some people they won't go to the grave, or they won't revisit, but for me this is therapeutic for me. This is therapeutic for me, because now I understand that she was an addict. She was an addict. And if you know anything about addiction, I can't even describe it. This is KC right here, a good friend of mine, and a really good friend of my grandmother's. They like family. He like family to me. And he's also the president of the Garage Bombs out here in Inkster. He has always taken care of this block, and I appreciate him. I appreciate him having to strong arm some folks sometimes, to get them off this block and quit causing problems. I really appreciate that about him, and I just want to thank you, KC, man.
No problem,
I
man.
love you, brother, man. I do, man.
Tell you like the church people, I love you. Ain't nothing you can do about it.
Ain't nothing you can do about it. You know what I'm saying? Nah, that's
That's fair.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's the dog I rescued from Canada, man. He helped me now.
right. He's showing you what he can do to you. Garage Bombs right here. This is it right here. This is the outside situation, and this is more of a summertime thing.
Yeah, we get it in the winter.
Oh, you get it in out there?
Oh, well, no, they come out here when they get too hot in here.
Yeah.
They come in here.
So, look it. No stupid people. Beyond this point, if you're stupid, you gotta go. But anyways, this is the cast corridor, the beginning of it, and this is where when I aged out of foster care, I came straight down here to the cast corridor. And right now, cast corridor actually looks a lot better. Detroit's did a lot with it and tore down a lot of stuff. But this used to be an area of homelessness, prostitution, and drugs. if you ever seen the movie New Jack City, this is kind of like the exact set how it used to be. And when I was when I was drinking a lot and everything, I would try to get into the shelters, but a lot of times I would be late getting in the shelter. And so I would have to find me a place to stay outside. And so these grates, they got these sewer grates, and the sewer grates have steam coming out of warm steam, and that's where I slept. I've slept on those grates a couple times because I was out, doing my drugs or drinking or whatever I was doing, and I missed my time to get into the shelter, and I would end up coming down here right across from the Temple Theater in that park and laying on those grates and trying my best to go to sleep. So I can't even describe to you how I was living down here. It was crazy. I started using crack down here. I got myself in all kinds of mess. This is where I've caught my first drug case down here. I started out as a drug seller and ended up as a drug user.
I've been forgiven of my sins, running over, running. I never thought I'd see the light of day. 5 piece attempted murder, plus I'm selling gay. How much dope I did, I lost count. All I know is I was smoking gas by the ounce. Running, tip 40 back till I black out. Hop in the stay, then I mash.
I've had several rock bottoms. But my rock bottom was, I really got tired of being depressed. I got tired of the things that I was telling myself. I got tired of being held back from the story I kept telling myself. Complex that I was in. Right here. Looks a lot better now, but it wasn't the case back then. This was dope, crack. That's how they used to sell their dope. And you would, the fiends would go in this front door, and there'd be 2 or 3 people sitting on the steps, and you would get up and you serve them up. And the elevator was right next to them steps. And we was all sitting on the steps that one day, and my man came down that elevator, and we knew what time it was, so we got up and we started walking away. And as soon as that elevator door opened, he cocked that shotgun and blew his chest right out. Blew his chest right out, bro. And we went into our apartments because we knew what time it was. And when the police showed up, the Wayne State police officer rammed his car through the back door, the back of the apartment complex. And there was Detroit police officers right out here in the front. And he was up at that top window just shooting and shooting and shooting out the window at the police officers. It was crazy, man. It was crazy. And he ended up shooting all of his ammo out, and then he turned himself in. He went downstairs, but when he started shooting, everybody went up in their apartments. It was crazy. The craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. This is where I came from, literally nothing. When I aged out of foster care. This is where I was at, literally nothing. And I used to stand in this line at 6 o'clock, and if you wasn't a part of the number of people that they let into the shelter, then you wasn't getting in. So you had to be down here on time and in line. And so I think that's why these guys are at the door right now, so they can get in line. And remember I was telling you about when I used to have to sleep on the steam grates. And so this is where I came from. So I'm gonna ask these fellas how it go now. What's up, bro? How y'all doing? I came from this, man, so I'm doing a documentary, and we used to have to stand in line at 6 o'clock. And if you wasn't in line, I think they let so many people in, and if you ain't in line, then you wasn't getting in. You know what I'm saying? Do they still do it that way?
I don't know how they really do it. I was working on the door when got these.
Oh, okay. You don't know how it go?
But I know now. Like,
Well, if you knock on the door, you're fine. They'll let you in.
they let you in because it's so cold out.
Oh, okay, okay.
So
How do you know? Let's see if they'll let us in.
See, like back in the 90s, they only let like 50, 60 people in, and if you wasn't in line, then they wasn't letting you in. My rock bottom came when I got so depressed that I actually wanted to take my own life, and I couldn't see no reason for living, even though I have a son. I couldn't see any reason to live. I couldn't see any reason to move on. I couldn't see what my purpose was in life. I didn't have a vision for myself. And so I ended up crying out to God about it, and you know, he sent me somebody in my life that really changed my perspective, helped me change my perspective, and actually called me out on myself, actually made me look at myself, made me look at my story, helped me to realize how God saw me. And once I understood that I needed to re-look at my story, and did that, I started seeing how my story was killing me. You know, I started seeing how the lies was killing me.
I met Al at New Beginnings Church in Bay City. And I was getting ready to rehab a house here in Bay City, and he had just started a handyman business, and I needed some help with some plumbing and drywall, which are two things that I cannot do myself. And so he came over, and that's how I met him. Al and I were working on the house one day, and I started to ask him some background questions, and he told me of his life experiences and how his mother had deserted him very young. And as a matter of fact, I make it a practice to informally adopt young people. They're usually between the ages of 20 and 40. Most of them don't have a living parent, or there's some problem in the family. And I told him, I thought it was the Lord's schedule that he told me about wanting a mother, because I said, well, that's easy, I'll just adopt you. And he behaved like I had just handed him $1 million.
There's been a lot of moments where Al believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. And because of that, like, that's my big brother for life, man. Like, that is my big brother for life. And I have never, and I will never question his heart toward people, toward his ministry, toward me. You know, if he does something, it's because his heart is in it, and he's very committed, very committed. So our relationship is a good one, man. It's definitely one of those iron sharpens iron type of deals, and you know, you kind of have to have a good support system. Born at first was a ministry Al was doing at the time, and it was like a festival. And I remember the year I attended, he invited like a bunch of different bands, and one of the rappers that attended was a rapper named Chris, and it was a festival at the time. And then afterwards, so the Born ministry was already going. And then afterwards, when we decided we wanted to do our own project, we just adopted the name Born. So instead of it being a festival, it kind of turned into a group. And we were like, you know, the music manifestation part of that for us, and we just kind of kept it going and carried it.
Mama always told me not to be afraid of those ghosts. I done met a lot of ghosts, and I'd have been ghosts to a lot of folks. Some I didn't try to, but some of y'all I had to say goodbye to. Some I gave a high five to, and some of y'all I had to just cry through. Some I never understand why, but I just walk away and thank the Most High. Still working on a part of me that's quick to forgive you in a minute when you do me wrong. still working on the part that'll pray for you, even when we both know you did me wrong. In Christ, I'm a new man, but I still am who I am. So if I ever get ghost, don't blame yourself. It was probably all in the plan.
I changed my story. It's been in the making for about 3 years now. And, you know, it started out as an autobiography, and then it started out as a memoir. And, you know, I've changed the book actually a few times. God's given me, you know, different directions. So I changed my story as a book about my experiences in the foster care system, and it's largely a book about my story that I had from coming up in the foster care system, which made up what my belief system was about myself and how I viewed the world around me, and how it affected my transition into society, and how it made my life a living hell in my adulthood. And to the point where I needed to change my story and add myself to it, and all the other things that we talked about in this interview, and how changing my story has improved my life, and how changing my story has allowed me to be more successful, how it has really improved my intimate relationships with people, my relationships with my friends, my family, you know, how it's brought me and my biological family closer together, how it's allowed me to help other people in foster care and in their transition. So the book, I get more in detail about some of my experiences in the foster care system and how it relates to transition. So it's really good. Okay. This is like a recovery process. It's a recovery process, and I want to say that even your guy that is 30 years old and hasn't transitioned in his head yet, he can sign up for services as well. You understand what I'm saying? Because it's a recovery process. And it doesn't, I don't know if I like the idea of having an age limit on recovery process from foster care, because that is a lifelong recovery process. River Jordan Inc. is a school of transition that I brought together with a great team of board members. And it's a school of transition. We have mentorship, we have peer advocacy, and we have peer recovery. And so all those things working together makes up River Jordan, and it's a program that links youth that are transitioning from foster care to, you know, things in the community. It's also a training program for youth that are transitioning. We're going to be working with juvenile justice youth and young adults, and it's a program of transition. That's all we deal with. We don't deal with any cognitive behavioral kind of stuff. We're just dealing with transition from foster care to independence. And that, you know, we try to train youth and get them mentally prepared for that transition, because there's a mentality that you have when you're in foster care and a mentality that you have to have when you transition. So we're trying to help them understand and help them with a new mindset. You know, so when you get out of foster care, you want to have relationships with people. You want to be able to work in an environment with other people and get along with other people. When you transition, you want to see yourself different. You want to, you know, pursue an education or vocation training of some sort. So you have to be able to have a different mindset when you go from foster care to society. And so that's what River Jordan is all about, transition. Top off and replace it with one that will match this countertop and the bar top. So I want everything to match. These cabinets can be redone, you know. This here is a half wall. My design was to tear down the walls and make this a half wall. It's gonna be like a countertop here. My main focus is to break down the stigmas and labels so they can get out of their situation, which is really what they're in. It's a situation. It's not who they are, it's a situation that they're in. So when they get out of the situation, they don't leave with that muck of stigmas and labels that's on them, okay? So that's what we hope that's the main thing, breaking down the stigmas and the labels.
And I will keep searching for you, God, and I just wanna be all that you ask of me. And I just wanna run after your heart so freely. I just wanna take a drink of your fountain that never runs dry.
It's been a long time since I've been high, and I don't wanna do it. But lately I've been reminiscing, cause I'm going through it. And while we all being real, let me tell you this. I got 6 years clean, but I'm still sick. Still getting my feelings, and still come up missing. Not always open and honest, but I'm still willing. Been acting out on my obsessions, but I didn't use. I wanna be all you ask, but I can't do it without you. So help me, Father, hear me calling your name out. Cause heaven knows I don't wanna go the same route. When I don't see no end, and they ain't really friends. I look over my shoulder, and there you go again. Yeah, please know that I'm a changed man. And if you knew me, you would know I'm not the same, man. I crucify the flesh daily, I'm in God's hands. I backslid, but now I'm